This is the voice of Stuart Pearce, and welcome to my series of Deep Dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Namaste, namaste, namaste. I am sitting here, ladies and gentlemen, with the most wonderful man called Harvey BROWNSTONE. And this is going to be an interesting, well, just gently movement of peace, because I met Harvey in August, September, when he interviewed me on his extraordinary podcast show. And I thought that Harvey has the most extraordinary personality and a lot of wisdom that I wanted him to share with all of you wonderful people. So welcome, Harvey, and all the wonderful people that are tuning in. Tara Jean, Stacey, Julie, Wendy, and there'll be all sorts of people tuning in. So before we go anywhere, let me introduce you to this wonderful man, because he is very extraordinary. Harvey was appointed to the Ontario Bar in 1983, and having risen through the ranks, then was positioned as a provincial judge in 1995, both within the family courts and the criminal courts. This made him the youngest justice in recorded history, and the first openly gay judge to be appointed within the Canadian justice system. In 2009, Harvey wrote a revolutionary book about the realities of family court procedure, etc., which received such wide-scale praise throughout North America that he was invited to host a reality TV show of his own, which ran for 2 years concerning the activities of family court, etc. And this was so successful that Harvey was actually the first justice to appear on a TV worldwide show, because this TV show is apparently winging around the whole of the world. Now, today, Harvey now hosts his own highly successful podcast show, interviewing notable people who have achieved a level of extraordinary creative potential in their lives and have therefore made a world of difference. And this is just a really short précis of an immensely expanded bio for this gentleman who sits with us just next to his grand piano. So Harvey, welcome to Deep Dialogues, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to appear on your show.
Oh, bless you, bless you. I'm so fascinated by the impetus that drew you to the world of justice, or indeed the world of the legal profession. Where was the trigger for you?
I would like to tell you that the trigger was an innate love of the law and of justice. The truth is that when I was 19 years old, this is 1976, I told my parents I was gay, and they rejected me. I was banished, and I developed an immediate need to become successful. I had to make something of myself so that my parents would approve of me and accept me and love me. And I thought that if I became a lawyer, because I'd always heard about big lawyers and big doctors, and I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, so I went to law school without any knowledge at all of what lawyers even did. I'd never met one. We had no lawyers in the family. But when I got to law school, I realized that I had an aptitude for the law. I was a good student. I was determined to be successful. And then once I became a lawyer, of course, Stuart, as you know, rejection is a great motivator. And I found that being a lawyer wasn't good enough. I needed to do more. I wanted to prove myself more. And so I worked extremely hard and got myself eventually appointed to the judiciary. So it really was motivated by rejection.
It's extraordinary, because in that moment, the wheel of destiny turned in the way that we were discussing in our pre-show chat. and you saw the opportunity, although I'm sure that there was a great deal of pain and a great deal of suffering surrounding the fact that you were rejected by the family. And this was a very long time ago. I mean, when the world was somewhat different from the level of consciousness, even if it appears to be so chaotic at this time. There is the agency of transparency, which is bringing us to a re-evocation of what all our hierarchy of values are all about. So this was it took bravery and courage to focus in this way. And how did you feel? I mean, having said to your parents, look, I'm actually gay, and they rejected you. Were you quiet? Were you, whatever the right phrase is, I don't mean discreet, but did you keep your gayness under wraps when you moved into the legal system?
Not at all. Because once the only people that you really care about don't want you, why would I care what anybody else thought? So I never was ever in the closet. I don't ever recall announcing that I was gay, but I made a decision consciously to simply live my life and be who I was. And it was well known simply because I was my own authentic, sincere, true self, which back in the 70s was not done. There were other gay people in my class at law school, but they were all in the closet. And I distinctly remember a professor telling me, it's a shame, Harvey, that you're such a good student because you're never going to get a job. You should never have been honest about who you are, because in the legal world, the profession is filled with a status quo mentality. You're simply never going to get a job. And Stuart, I want you to know that after I was appointed to the judiciary in my 30s, I was invited back to that law school to give a speech because, of course, they were very proud of this alumnus. And that same professor, we had a chat, and I reminded him of what he'd said to me, and he was very apologetic, and, attitudes changed.
Yeah, yeah. But again, this revolutionary zeal that you had, just simply through the beauty and wonder of your own authenticity, that it kept you moving forward. There must have been bleak moments. What techniques did you use to move through those bleak moments?
Well, I found myself homeless and penniless at the age of 19 years old. So that was very bleak. I'm very fortunate. When I got to the university and discovered that my parents had really cut me off, because I told them I was gay on the eve of going away to school,
Right.
not knowing that they were going to really do what they said they were going to do. They cut me off, and I found myself with no money. I went to see the dean, and the dean at the university deserves a great deal of credit. He was very compassionate, and he said, I'm going to help you get welfare as social assistance. And I did. I was on welfare for 5 years. In fact, I have to tell you, when I had my interview to be appointed to the judiciary, I said to the panel, I'll bet I'm the only applicant that you've interviewed who actually knows what it's like to live on welfare, because I did. And their jaws dropped, because all of my colleagues on the judiciary went to private schools. They lived very advantaged lives. And I was able to say to the committee, I actually know what it's like to be really alone and to have no money and to be feeling like you're on the outside looking in, because that's what happened to me. So I'm grateful that all of that happened, because it made me a much more empathetic, more sensitive, more compassionate judge than if I had not experienced that. So I'm grateful to my parents. We did reconcile, everything got better. But to answer your question, yes, there was enormous isolation there. I contemplated suicide at one point, but even there, destiny helped me. I called the suicide prevention line, thinking that maybe the person at the other end of the phone might be able to convince me of why I shouldn't just end it all. And they put me on hold. And I got angry sitting there on hold. And I said to myself, why, if you're angry, you couldn't really want to die, or you wouldn't care. So I hung up and I never looked back, and everything got better after that.
And so if you were to define these remarkable characteristics that you're illustrating through the story, there are profound tenets that brought you forward, these great skills that were um, a protectorate around you that kept moving you forward. No matter where you were hit, you were kept moving forward. And it feels to me that you were right in position with your guardian angel, that your guardian angel was constantly looking after you. I mean, for example, was that level of facility, was that open to your consciousness at that time? Or
Absolutely. I never doubted for a moment that I had a guardian angel, some kind of divine guidance that was seeing me through, because I had very well defined intuition
Mm,
and inspiration. And it
mm,
felt like it was coming through some force, some archetypal force. And I've always followed that intuition. Every decision I've made, relationships, career, real estate, anything I've done, certainly on the bench as a judge, I was very intuitive in my assessment of people's credibility and
mm.
finding the fact. And even in the way I applied the law, I distinguished myself as breaking through the barriers, the protocol, the legal procedure, the rules of evidence, and tried to maintain humanity in that courtroom. And all of that came, I believe, from guardian angels.
Amazing, amazing. Wow. So when you feel the intuitive witness of your being functioning for you, often in situations, for example, if I float back to what you were just saying and see you in the judicial system, in court, dealing with, let's say, a pretty horrendous situation, because there you were, not just in family court, but in the criminal court. So you must have actually encountered some pretty severe case studies. Um, are there ways of being able to define how your intuition, as it were, motored you through? Are there points of recognition within the whole of your consciousness? Are there techniques that you used? Anything specific that you would like to touch into?
Well, when I had people in front of me in family court, for example, these would be couples that would be unable to resolve disputes in their marriage breakup. I made a point of always communicating directly to them. You will often find that in family court, the judges prefer to talk to the lawyers.
Mhm.
They don't really feel comfortable communicating directly to the litigants. That always struck me as counterproductive. It was counterintuitive. And there was something disrespectful about it, because you're talking about people as if they're not there,
Mm,
but they are there. So I would deal directly with the parents and try to reach them at an emotional level about the impact on their children of what this dispute was doing,
mm,
and try to resolve cases in family court with a child-focused approach.
mm,
In criminal court, you're dealing with victims who have suffered sometimes very violent, very vicious crimes, and you're dealing with offenders, for the most part, who have had horrible lives themselves. They were not properly parented. They had disabilities, perhaps learning disabilities. They have substance abuse issues. There are a myriad of mental health problems that populate the criminal court. And I found that coming from a place of compassion, coming from a place that there, but for the grace of God, could have been me, gave me perhaps a unique approach in criminal court. At least the lawyers told me it was a unique approach, because I think the law is there to be used as a vehicle to problem solve. We're not there to serve the law, which is generally the culture of the courts. I believe that the law was there to serve us and to assist us to resolve human problems, problems of certainly accountability, problems that have to do with taking responsibility, of determining what really happened. But I truly believe that intuition and maintaining a strong connection with the human factor in all of these cases is essential. I would like to think other judges caught on to that, but sadly, that was really not my experience.
You are remarkable, Harvey. You're very unique and original within the context of perhaps how many of us perceive the judiciary. I've had a number of High Court judges as clients over the years within the realm of public speaking. Not that judges necessarily are appalling at public speaking, quite the opposite. But there's often a point where perhaps excellence has been created and then suddenly a problem has arisen and they haven't been able to find a way of being able to resolve it, particularly if it was physiological as a result of course, as we both know, that the judiciary tends to have a lot of downtime afterwards where there's a lot of alcohol being drunk. And often, when alcohol is consumed in vast quantities, we become very dehydrated. And the general reason for vocal loss is dehydration. So often that would be the case. And I'd have to say, well, actually, just, wean yourself off the whiskey and start drinking lots more water so that you take away the acute dysphonia that you're having. However, the context that we see is, to coin a phrase, raunch patriarchalism. And there you were within that particular situation, and yet constantly tuning into the way that your compassionate barometer, I guess your heart, rather than the deeper area of your gut, although I'm sure that from an emotional point of view, that was also engaged, but you were actually being so wonderfully judicious about the way that developed energy boundaries to use your heart to bring about compassionate means to the end of great suffering. I mean, this is quite unique within the judiciary.
It was unique. I have to say that I never really quite felt that I fit in. I think that unfortunately, many judges develop what we call judgeitis.
Right.
They believe that they really are omnipotent and that they really have the answers to everything. There's a remoteness that comes with many judges, a sense of robotic behavior that I found off-putting. I really didn't get the feeling that many of my colleagues really had empathy and compassion for the people that came before them. I think they tried. I think if you were to ask them, they would say that they did. Some did. I shouldn't be overly generalizing. There are some excellent judges, but the law is the primary focus for most judges. Obviously, you have to know the law. I'm proud to tell you that I was never overturned by a court of appeal in 26 years on the bench. So I can tell you I knew the law and I applied the law. But so much of what you do in a courtroom where you're dealing with people at the worst time of their lives has to do with human issues, with relationships. And, for example, in family court, when you think about it, when a couple break up, they're still going to have to deal with each other for the next 20 years. They've got young children. They're going to have to find a way to communicate and cooperate with each other. They have to reinvent themselves from ex-partners to co-parents. And the justice system should help people do that. But unfortunately, the justice system is very adversarial. It's hostile. It's not conducive to making peace. The justice system is about making war, and it's about mudslinging, and it's about winning. And my attitude was in family court that nobody wins in family court. There's only degrees of losing, and the biggest losers are the children. And that was always my focus. And I thought, especially when I went on television, after I wrote my book, which became a national bestseller because it was an honest book that told the public the truth about what really goes on in family court and why you should try to avoid it at all costs, because you should never let a stranger decide what's going to happen to your children. And then I went on television. I used that TV show to bring experts on the show to explain to the public why it's much more important to try to resolve your issues privately and with the help of counseling and therapy and mediators, rather than to have some stranger do it in a courtroom, I didn't get the support from my colleagues in the judiciary that I would have thought. Not at all.
It's interesting, huh? Because the themes that come to my consciousness as you describe this is that you were engaged in justice, whereas the majority of your colleagues were engaged in judgment.
And legal analysis.
And legal analysis, were caught within the construct purely of the intellect and the cerebral, and how the ego serves the combative and competitive nature of how that intellectual construct can be fulfilled, whereas you were constantly tuning in with this very refined articulation that you have in your mental body, but tuning into what your heart was saying. Again, I know I asked the question about the fine dialing of your heart and how your intuition worked. I often see intuition as the intuition, the inner teacher speaks. And in quasi-spiritual terms, this really means our higher self, or if we go much deeper into a more legitimate statement, I feel it's our soul that's actually speaking, and that we're beginning to realize that we are all co-creative in the functioning of our souls, that it's about inclusivity rather than exclusivity. And as you so beautifully put, the people that you were reviewing were people that had often been through dire circumstances and had lost their way. However, so you actually worked this process for some considerable amount of time, and then you chose to write the book, or you were asked to write a book in 2009, and it became immensely successful. And that must have been extraordinary, because I know in my own career how I was seeing myself working through the substance of being a voice coach, which was, running a department in a leading conservatoire, dealing with young people, etc., and thinking, how long can this go on for? Is this something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, or is there another creative opportunity? And then eventually, as I said that, so to speak, to the universe, another creative opportunity came, where I was able to move into the management of a major theatre, the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. And so that changed. But as the book was actually being announced in the world, did you suddenly feel that there was, this is interesting, my career is going off in another direction?
Well, let me first clarify, no one asked me to write the book. In fact, the Chief Justice at the time was not at all pleased. It had never been done anywhere in the world that a sitting judge would write a book intended for the general public. There are books written by judges that are textbooks in law schools, but certainly not for the public. And there was a great deal of anxiety about what was I going to say. Is Harvey some kind of loose cannon who's going to trash the court? I didn't trash the court. I simply explained to people what they should expect if they were going to come to family court, and what the judges were going to expect from them. And that book, which was called Tug of War, did become a huge success. And I totally relate to what you're saying. I did get the sense that this was embarking me on a journey that was different. And when the publisher saw that the book, I think it went to the bestseller list in Canada within a week.
Wow.
They employed a publicist at the publishing house that for 18 months sent me on a national tour. I was still presiding in court full time, but evenings and weekends, I was traveling all over the country, giving speeches, going on radio shows and talk shows. This also had never been done. No judge had ever spoken to the media in Canada. It's very, very unusual for a sitting judge to speak to the media. But I went on radio call-in shows and answered people's questions. I didn't give legal advice, but I gave information. And I found really that judges, we're not just adjudicators. Judges are educators, public educators, and they have a lot of information about the justice system and about the law that they can share. And I never understood the fear, the panic that would strike in the heart of judges at the thought of ever having the media speaking to the media. But I liked it. I found the media to be very fair with me. They really appreciated the efforts I was making to try to enhance access to justice. And from that, I was offered a television show, and we did that for 2 seasons. The difficulty was the show did well, but the network wanted much more Harvey and much less Justice Brownstone. And Stuart, I needed to make a living. I was a judge. I did not want to lose my job. And I had to be careful. I couldn't express opinions on the show. You know, I couldn't talk about any issues that might become litigated, for example, same-sex marriage, because that was before the courts at the time. I was very restricted. And so, you know, I was a little bit like pablum, no flavor, no texture. And, but I did learn that I liked the media, that I had a flair for it, that I, at some point I would, when I retired from the judiciary, I would end up back in the media. Mm. And that was very intuitive. I just knew.
Fascinating, fascinating. I didn't realize that you continued sitting as a judge all the way through the process of doing the TV show.
Oh, yes.
But then you got to a point where you realized that you wanted to retire from the judiciary.
Yes, that was a shock, because most judges that I know work right to the end, right till 75. In Canada, you must retire at 75, but you're eligible for a pension at 65. Well, by the time I reached 65, I had already been a judge 26 and a half years, and I felt that really was enough. So I did retire with the full pension. Most of my colleagues thought I was crazy because their judicial role became their identity. They couldn't imagine not being a judge. They didn't have any identity outside of the courtroom. And with me, I enjoyed being a judge. It was I appreciate what an important job it was, but it wasn't my life. So I decided that I would launch an interview program because I love interview shows, and I was disappointed with the caliber of interviews that I was seeing on television. There's very few people like you and me, Stuart, that actually do our research and ask interesting questions and are good listeners.
Well, thank you. You're an amazing interviewer. I would like to think that I was a good interviewee.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're sharing a very common trait, which is that we're fascinated about people, but B, we're also fascinated about the nature of consciousness and the way that the nature of that human nature and the choices that people make develop whatever their soulfulness is, or indeed a seeming lack of soul. And so it's, you know, this is why I had to, for example, call this platform Deep Dialogues, because it's about really establishing a new vibrational field where people are literally let into the authenticity of an august one like yourself. You have very extraordinary insights that have been derived from your experience within a very tight, myopic sphere of life, and yet you brought an expanded level of consciousness to that filter. I find it very remarkable.
Well, I have to tell you that interviewing is a very interesting skill. You know, when I was a lawyer, I never lost a trial. And the reason, I think, is because when I had a witness on the witness stand, I did not examine and cross-examine in the traditional sense. I interviewed them. I gained their confidence. I got them to open up. And you can't do that unless you project sincerity, authenticity, and compassion. And it worked for me. And so when I started my interview show and began interviewing Hollywood celebrities, because that's mostly what I do, big music stars and Hollywood stars, they found it refreshing that this interviewer was actually interested in what motivates them, what's going on in their soul, what happened to the person they used to be before they became an international celebrity. It's not just about promoting the latest movie or the latest album. It's deeper than that. That all came from my legal training, from my work in the courtroom, trying to get at who these people really are, especially as a judge. You know, if I have they would give you 25 cases a day in family court. That's not a lot of time with each couple to figure out what's the right decision for custody of their children. It's actually shocking. And if you don't have the ability to peel away the layers and figure out what's really motivating them, what's really going on, you're not going to make good decisions. I'm not saying that every decision I made was good. That would be incredibly ridiculous. But I did my best to try to figure out who they were. And so that's what I bring to my show.
Fascinating. So there's a level of perspicacity, this mental penetration about balancing the way that you're thinking and the way that you're feeling as you were dealing with the musculature of what the courts brought to the forefront of your consciousness. What was the most trying situation that you found in either family courts or criminal courts? What was the most difficult? Perhaps the one that you felt least satisfied with in terms of its outcome?
Well, I had a couple in family court that were very immature. They were young. Both of them were very immature, and they couldn't agree on custody. They were fighting very bitterly. The child was a 7-year-old boy, and both parents insisted that I meet this child, that if I were to meet the child would tell me who he really wanted to live with. And they were each convinced that the child would tell me that he wanted to live with them. And that's very frowned upon in family court. We don't generally interview children. There is a process to get the children's views before the court, but rarely do judges interview children. It's quite traumatic. It puts them on the spot. You should not have to choose between your parents when you're a child. But these parents were so indignant that they talked me into it. And I bring this child into my chambers, and we begin to talk. And he says to me, he's 7. He says to me, "I wish I were dead." And I said, why would you ever say something like that? And he said, because it's the only way my parents are going to stop fighting is if I were dead. And that was a moment when I realized, first of all, I said to him, your parents are not really fighting about you. This isn't about you at all. This is about the anger and the sense of betrayal and all of the issues that they have between them. Even if you did die, they would not stop fighting. But it made me feel so helpless, Stuart, because I know that the justice system wasn't going to fix this problem. No matter who the child went with, this battle was going to continue, and this child was going to be used as a pawn and a weapon and a tool and a spy. And I felt very despondent because I knew that the tools I had at my disposal as a judge were not going to work. This family needed intense therapy, and family court is many things, but it's not therapeutic.
Wow. I hope you're all realizing this as we listen into this extraordinary gentleman's answering. Ladies and gentlemen, can I just draw your attention, because I know the chat box has gone really quiet as we are enthralled by the nature of what you're saying, and also able to really connect so deeply with the compassionate aspect of what you're discussing and what you're sharing with us. Because after all, this particular Sahar is a friend of mine who's in Dubai, who's saying what a wonderful person. And lots of other extraordinary people tuning in. Hello, Jacob. Hello. It's very rare in my experience that here is this gentleman sitting in front of us, able to impart such spiritual wisdom from this particular viewpoint. I hope you're all grasping this. And if there are any questions that you'd like to ask, please do. It would be absolutely fascinated to hear what you have to offer. It's reported that one particular commentator on the substance of the judiciary once said, you get justice in the next world. In this world, you have the law. What you did was to bring about a completely different aspect of the way that the judiciary could function within the context of all of your particular cases. As you moved into the interview situation, did you find yourself caught up at all in people coming to you saying, "By the way, I've got this problem that I need to sort out. Do you have any advice?"
I do get that a lot. I try to steer people to legal counsel because I don't want to give legal advice. And really, to be honest with you, that's a part of my life that I've left. I'm proud of what I achieved as a judge. But it doesn't consume me. I always knew, like I told you, that I never really fit in. I wasn't really cut out to be within that culture. I was naive in thinking when I got the job that young and when I had my own particular vision of what I thought the court system should be, I thought that I could really impact systemically some changes. For example, Stuart, in criminal court, and this is true everywhere, the vast majority of clientele in criminal court are mentally ill or they have substance abuse. We do see criminals who are just bad people and they need to be locked up. I would be lying if I said differently, but the vast majority of people commit crimes because of problems. The incarceration of those people achieves nothing. If you're a drug addict and you commit offenses, property offenses, in order to feed your habit, being sent to jail does nothing, because as soon as you get out, you're going to go right back to what you were doing. And even more tragically, if you're suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness, you are not going to be helped in jail. If you need medication or if you need therapy, that's not the answer. You will just be warehoused and then you will come out of jail and you will go right back to what you were doing before. And it's a revolving door, and it's an expensive revolving door. And everyone connected to the justice system knows this. This is the topic that behind closed doors, everyone talks about, is how futile jail is for most people and how ridiculously expensive the justice system is, the criminal justice system, that achieves really nothing. And if we had the money that we're spending on policing and probation and courts and correctional services, and we actually did more for drug rehab and mental health services, you would really see a profound difference. And I was shocked as a young judge that this was so obvious and everyone knows it, but there isn't the political will to make those necessary changes, to allocate the funds necessary to get people mental health treatment and substance abuse rehab. And that's just so frustrating. You feel very, very helpless in that job. So, I was glad to leave because I could see that there is no impetus. There is lip service paid to all these things I've mentioned to you, but there is no will to do something about it. There is in Europe. We've seen it in Scandinavia. We do not see it in North America. We have not seen it in England. Mm-hmm. And it's disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an insight? I know we can hear the breath of resolution and solutions in what you're saying, but do you have an insight into why this may be so, why there is such a blanket lack of interest in relation to the true rehabilitation of the criminal?
Well, I think that politicians are interested in satisfying the electorate who voted for them, and they want to get reelected. And people who are marginalized and disenfranchised have no voice. No one cares about drug addicts. No one cares about helping mentally ill people in terms of reallocating funds from the justice system. It's easier for politicians to talk about law and order and safety without looking at the big picture. If you really want safety, if you really want to rehabilitate someone, you don't put someone in an environment where they're just being housed with a whole bunch of other dysfunctional people. Who in their right mind would think that that is going to rehabilitate anyone? I mean, think about it. It's the last thing you want to do. And I remember as a judge doing everything I could not to send young teenagers or 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old men to jail, because who are they going to make friends with in jail? Who are going to be their role models? So you send someone to jail, let's say for stealing a car. By the time they get out of jail, now they know how to rob a bank. They know where to get guns. That is the last environment that's going to rehabilitate a young man who is struggling for roots. And I know what I'm saying is resonating with you and your viewers, because anytime I talk about this, people say, yes, that's true. That makes total sense. But the politicians don't want to hear it. It's not a priority item in the budget.
Well, in the experience of the social and spiritual revolution that is taking place, I feel that what you're speaking about is the complete denial of the acknowledgement of the shadow, that there is the intellect conspiring with the ego to create that competitive nature of the ego moving forward and being successful. But there's a complete disacknowledgement of what the crisis in our world is really all about. And of course, this is an interesting time where the shadow is out. Thank God our time is now, when dark comes out at every turn, never to leave us until we take the longest stride of soul we humans ever took. That's a quote from a poem by Christopher Fry, that this is a time of soul awakening, so that we can begin to recognize the balance of the light with the dark and bring the light into the dark in the way that you are doing, through great compassionate means. So thank you for saying that. And I know that many people have you see everybody in the, not everybody, but lots of people in the chat box are saying how true, speaking from the heart. Harvey seems genuinely very modest. Yes, Harvey is. And Harvey is spot on with the whole thing. So let's move forward to the uniqueness of what's happening now for you, because I feel that you're also revolutionizing the whole context of this thing called retirement, which is this my brother keeps saying to me, because I'm 70, when are you going to retire? And I said, don't use the word around me. I am never going to be retiring. I have I have boundless creative energy, and I've only just begun. I mean, I'm just discovering what it is to have sustainable joy in relation to success. And that's the way that I consider a definition of success. So tell us about what you would like to achieve over the next 10 years.
Well, first of all, I never call it retirement. I call it rewiring. I didn't retire, I rewired. And I chose to start this interview program, Harvey Brownstone Interviews, by inviting celebrities to come on my show and really talk in a profound way about their careers and about their lives. And much to my surprise, what started out as a hobby, and that's really what it was going to be, just something to occupy my time, given that I wasn't going to be a judge anymore. I was thinking of writing a book as well. I probably will write a memoir. I'm going to call it Homo Improvement. But I found, to my surprise, not only were celebrities agreeing to come on the show, but the show began to attract an audience. And within 6 months, we had like 1 million viewers. We now got over 4.5 million viewers a month watching the show. We get some incredibly legendary stars coming on. And, my destiny seems to have taken over, because I now have a management team, a wonderful husband and wife team, Rick and Rob and Bragg Marcelli in Hollywood, who have taken over managing my career. Our show is on television in the UK on XPTV1 and doing extremely well. We've been renewed for a second season. We're in negotiations now with several networks. The show has really taken off. And so I'm just putting out my particular brand of interviewing. I had the great honor of having Mr. Stuart Pearce on my show. So you know what my approach is.
Oh, it's an amazing interview, because it wasn't cursory. It was really, there you were, asking me very authentically what it was like to have a relationship with Princess Diana and why I would choose to write the book. at this particular time. It was an excellent interview, and we must. I will ask my team to draw it out, and we must keep posting it around through social media again, because it will be wonderful to have more people clicking on. So. In other words, what you're describing is the fact that this new venture is moving through its own gestation. Is there any particular objective that you would like to realize as we go through the next 5 years of interviewing the people that you're interviewing?
I would very much like to see the show move off of the internet and onto a major platform, because I think that gives the show the opportunity to attract even bigger celebrities who've achieved more. I'm very interested in interviewing people who have become iconic, people who have used their celebrity to convey important messages. I think you've done that, Stuart. You know, you took your relationship with Diana and you taught us not only who she really was, but the lessons that you and she worked on and discovered and absorbed were lessons that we all needed. And one of the reasons why your book is so transformational, it's so life-altering, is because you allowed us to get to know this woman, and you also allowed us to employ the exercises that you worked on with her to find our own voices, to solidify our own identities, to develop gravitas. And so you're a good example of a guest that's really a pleasure for me to have on the show, because you teach people. You know, I think a good program like yours should inspire, educate, comfort, and yes, entertain as well. If you can achieve those 4 objectives, I think you've got a good program that makes people feel that their time was well spent. So over the next 5 years, you know, with the direction and guidance of my managers in Los Angeles, I do expect that we will end up on a major network where I will have the opportunity to conduct interviews like you do that are deeper, where we get into the person's soul, that we get into the person's personality, their life journey, their path, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their disappointments. And I think that's to me, that's fascinating, to get to know the real person behind the legend.
I absolutely pray for this opportunity to occur for you. I feel that it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And it's completely in sync with the nature of the way that the spiritual revolution within the consciousness of the human species is taking place. Because after all, we're hearing wherever we go a cry for authenticity, a statement about where are the true leaders. And so I feel, you see, by taking people in the way that you do, who have already had established careers, and hearing about the landscape that they moved through, both in relation to the great successes and also to the great falls. We both know that we love the successes, but actually we've learned more by the falling than by the success. That it's wonderful to have the trophies, but actually where the true grit, where the true bravery, courage, sustainability, and incisive investigation into self. Why has this happened? Because this was a great aspect of my dream. That becomes really useful information to us as we move forward in this changing world, this brave new world that is requiring a redefinition of its values. You're doing that.
Well, I certainly try to do it. I'm very interested in resilience. I'm interested in understanding why some people take an obstacle and find a way to overcome it and become strengthened by it. You know, and I think that's because in my own situation, gay men from my generation, many of them fell by the wayside. There were a lot of suicides. There was a lot of self-destructive behavior when they were rejected by their families.
Mm.
And I don't really know what it was about me that converted the disappointment and the hurt from my parents to anger. It created an angry young man who was determined he was going to make something of himself and prove himself and earn their respect and their acceptance and hopefully their love, which thankfully all of that happened. But there were many people who can't. It doesn't happen for them. And I hope that through interviewing people who have had those kinds of setbacks that you mentioned, that we can inspire other people not to give up and to find a way to take a setback, to take a disappointment, to take a failed relationship, to take an addiction, to take a tragedy in their life, and find a way to make it the foundation for something good and successful and meaningful and joyful. Most really successful people did that. That's the common theme I find. Most, it's not that famous or rich or powerful or beautiful people had it easy. Quite the contrary. But they developed resilience. And I am very fascinated by what it was. What are the ingredients of resilience? How do you become not only a survivor, but triumphant? So that's my personal mission.
I think this is fascinating because from an archetypal point of view, you're examining the state of what the warrior zeal is all about, that it's brave and courageous. And all of those energies, all of those sustainable energies, the pure muscle of I will succeed, I will achieve, this is for the greater good, that they always have their eye on the future. They always have their eye on the light of infinity, and often have profound either philosophic or religious or spiritual values in the sense of believing in the divinity of the all that is and shall be forevermore. You know, that often carries them forward. If we have our eye on the light, is there a rainbow in the sky? The wonderful Maya Angelou would often say. I think this is absolutely true. I noticed that there are no questions being asked in the chat box, which is always a good sign because it means that people are absolutely enthralled by the nature of the clarity of what is being communicated. But we have a few more moments left, ladies and gentlemen. So if there are any questions you'd like to ask of this wonderful man, please do. You know, in particular from the point of view of the fact that he is exceptional in the sense of what he have just revealed to us, which is he is a very, very successful gay man who moved through one of the most staunch patriarchal establishments and was not in denial of his sexuality, but actually was in celebration of the totality of his authenticity. What I refer to as being, from an archetypal point of view, you knew your personal sovereignty. You developed your personal sovereignty. And interestingly, your robes and the seat in which you sat was your throne, and the family courts, or indeed the criminal courts, were your kingdom. And you were able to very judiciously hand out extraordinary empathy and compassion. There are archetypal considerations that have buzzed through my consciousness as you've been sharing with us. You know, particularly, for example, that story about the parents and the 7-year-old child. It's, you know, going all the way back to King Solomon, and we all know how he found a point of resolution. Is there anybody particular who's in the forefront of our consciousness at this time that you would like to have on your show?
Well, there are many actors that I would really love to interview. I love Meryl Streep. I'm a big, big admirer of Maggie Smith. You know, I'm a big admirer of Helen Mirren and Judi Dench and Robert De Niro. And, you know, so I'm really focusing very heavily on the Hollywood stars. And also many legendary music stars. You know, I'm fascinated by the road to success.
Yeah.
It seems to me that destiny plays a very large part in success in the entertainment industry. It's not just talent. And I also want to tell you, Stuart, that, and you know this because you've worked with so many big stars, the more talented they are and the more successful they are, the nicer they are and the more humble they are. That's been a real eye opener for me. And I like my viewers to see that, that with great talent, with great gifts come, when a person is living true to themselves, they don't need to have a big ego. They are truly humble and kind and compassionate. And I'm always very happy when the audience gets to see that side of them. Then when they're just being themselves, they're incredibly kind and considerate and professional. My experience doing this show has been remarkable. I'm amazed at how welcoming and open the Hollywood community has been to me. I mean, after all, I was an unknown, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I've learned a lot about what it takes to become successful and how you should behave when you are successful.
I feel the clarion call of another book.
That will come for sure.
These points of definition are unique and quite rare. You know, that so often with the personalities like the ones that we're referring to, they're quite busy bubbling along, engaged in the next job. And of course, as we both know, that the work of the performer, the work of the entertainer is really all consuming. And so it's often rare that there is internal reflection. But if we're dealing with the people that we're talking about, these are people that are emotionally really intelligent and have considered all of the wonders that you're talking about. I mean, it would be wonderful to see you in conversation with Meryl. I think she is absolutely, absolutely amazing. And one of the truest, as you were saying, you know, one of the great humble people that are around at the moment. I was just seeing earlier on, one of my clients in Los Angeles sent me this gorgeous review of Meryl, who's now called a GOAT, G-O-T, which is it's an acronym for how splendid you are, rather than and Meryl heard that it was being used and automatically assumed that she was being referred to as an old goat, until she was told no, G-O-A-T means da 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 da.
It means greatest of all time.
Exactly, the greatest of all time. Thank you. Harvey, this has been an amazing moment, or few moments, to share with you. I want to thank you very deeply from the core of my being. See, people are saying how one of the most beloved and respected judges in the courts. Yay! Fabulous interview. Thank you so much. Harvey really deserves a network series. He is going to have it. By pure dint of purpose, he will. The angels are sorting it out, I can feel. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you're going to be in unison with me in thanking Harvey for this hour that he spent with us. I've been looking forward to it for many months, so I'm really glad that it's happened. And I'm going to invite him back during the next season. He doesn't know this yet, but hopefully he will come back on, and the next male global soul steward. And we'll see where you are at in 6 months to 8 months' time. It'll be absolutely fascinating. So on your behalf, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. And I want to thank this wonderful gentleman who's sitting here. And don't forget, next week at the same, well, actually not at the same time as far as the North America is concerned, but it will be back to the regular time, because I understand that your clocks change next weekend. So here it is. Recommend people to listen into the recording. And thanks so much, Harvey. It's been wonderful sharing time with you. Please do stay where you are. And Ryan, thank you very much. Let's close down now.